ancient scrolls that were buried in volcanic ash during the eruption of Mount Vuvius are now being deciphered 2,000 years later, thanks in part to artificial intelligence. When Mount Vuvius erupted in 79 AD, it buried an entire library in boiling ash. The people are gone, the cultures are gone, the places are gone, and yet, like a time capsule, you have this item that tells a story. For centuries, the scrolls inside looked like lumps of charcoal, too fragile to open, too precious to destroy. Scholars tried knives, chemicals, and machines, but every attempt failed. Then, after nearly 2,000 years, AI broke through the silence. It read the inside of a scroll without unrolling it, and what appeared first left even the experts speechless. The lost library buried by Vesuvius. Herculaneum sat on the Bay of Naples, right below Mount Vuvius. Vuvius isn't just a mountain, it's a volcano. And in the year 79 AD, it blew apart with deadly force. The explosion blasted out clouds of burning ash and poison gas that tore down the slopes like avalanches of fire. Scientists call these pyrolastic surges, but in plain words, they were superheated storms. Mud and gas known as pyrolastic flow hurtled straight towards Herculaneum. Fast choking waves of boiling air and ash that could outrun a horse and cook everything in their way. Pompeii, the more famous town, was buried by heavy ash falling from the sky. Herculaneum's story was different. Here, the surges hit first, slamming into the streets and homes and locking them in a shell of ash that hardened into stone. Whole rooms were frozen as they had been that morning, tables still set, food still on, plates, beams, and doors still standing. Even papyrus scrolls and wooden furniture survived. Later surges stacked more and more material on top until the town lay under almost 100 feet of hardened volcanic debris. Imagine nearly 10-story buildings worth of ash on top of you, packed so tightly it turned to stone over centuries. You must know which is the scale of a possible catastrophe in a volcano like this. This is the most dangerous volcano in the world. That's what hid Herculaneum from the world for more than 1,000 years. Among the treasures buried, there was one mansion so massive and extravagant that pieces of it were later recreated as a museum in California. The original villa stretched right along the ancient shoreline. In its prime, its sea-facing side ran for about 820 feet. To picture it, imagine a private Roman resort with long terraces stepping down toward the water, gleaming marble floors underfoot, bronze statues glowing in the sun, and endless rows of columns where guests could stroll in the shade with the sea breeze in their hair. This was the famous Villa of the Papyri, and inside this villa was a library. In bookcases and wooden boxes sat hundreds of papyrus scrolls, the written treasures of the household. When the fiery surges rolled through, the scrolls didn't burn to ash like dry leaves. Instead, they cooked in a kind of low-oxygen oven. The heat carbonized them, baking the plant fibers into black, brittle cylinders that looked like pieces of charcoal. So, the scroll looks like something you might put on your barbecue. It's so light and burnt, but the ink and the papyrus are almost made out of the same stuff. So you need a bright. To anyone who didn't know better, they seemed worthless. But locked inside was the writing, the words of the ancient world, trapped in the most fragile time capsule imaginable. Today, most of the villa remains buried, hidden under the modern town, but the parts already explored gave us this once-in-a-lifetime find. Who owned this place? The villa was not some average home. Many scholars point to Lucius Calpurnius Piso, Quaesonus, Julius Caesar's father-in-law. The theory makes sense. Piso had the wealth to afford such a sprawling mansion on prime seaside land, and the papyri themselves give more clues. The match between the texts and Piso's known circle is strong enough that historians often describe the villa as Piso's, though cautiously, because there's no surviving deed with his name on it. Reaching this villa, buried nearly 100 feet down, took serious resources. In the 1750s, the Bourbon, king of Naples, funded deep excavations. Crews dug vertical shafts straight down and then cut horizontal tunnels like miners carving through hardened volcanic stone, picture descending 90 feet, into pitch blackness and then crawling through narrow galleries just wide enough for men and carts. The Swiss engineer Karl Weber, who oversaw the work, carefully sketched plans, recorded finds, and tried to keep things orderly. The library is unlike anything else ever found. It's the only big ancient library that survived as a real library, not just broken scraps or secondhand copies passed down through the ages. And the sheer numbers are jaw-dropping. The official tally lists 1,814 rolls and fragments. A later recount adjusted that to 1,826. Out of those, more than 340 are almost complete. About 970 are partly decayed, but partly readable, and more than 500 are little more than charred fragments. And those figures don't even tell the whole story. In the earliest days, before people realized what they were, workers tossed some rolls away. Others were even burned for light. The turning point came by pure accident. A worker dropped one of the brittle cylinders, and when it broke open on the floor, the jagged edge revealed letters, Greek letters still etched on the inside. That single accident transformed what looked like lumps of coal into priceless books. The first man tasked with opening the scrolls was Camillo Paderni, an artist turned librarian. His orders were simple: impress the king. But the job was anything but simple. Paderni tried the only approach he could think of: knives. He sliced rolls lengthwise, scraped away outer layers until lines of text appeared and copied them down before scraping again. Imagine peeling a burnt croissant layer after layer with words flashing briefly before being destroyed. His method did produce some fragments we can still study today, but it also destroyed untold amounts of text. A modern scholar said the parts he scraped away were actually the best parts for reading. Once gone, they were gone forever. In 1753, a new caretaker took over. Abbot Antonio Piau, a man from the Vatican Library. Instead of knives, he brought patience and a handmade contraption. His device looked like a cross between a music box and a press with wooden frames, glass plates, tiny silk threads, and carefully balanced weights. The idea was to hook a barely visible edge of papyrus and pull it ever so slightly day after day, letting each sheet lift away at the slowest possible pace. Progress was measured not in pages but in inches per hour. A good run meant less than half an inch of new surface revealed in a day. Still, this delicate machine saved far more text than Paderni's knives. The Poggio device is why so many readable scrolls survive today. You can still see one of his machines preserved in Naples, a reminder of how much patience it took to coax words out of these fragile remains. Not everyone believed in patience. In the early 1800s, the famous chemist Humphrey Davy tried a different tactic. With royal funding, he came to Naples to see if chemicals could loosen the rolls. He used chlorine and other reagents to relax the papyrus. Sometimes he succeeded in freeing sheets. He claimed 24 manuscripts opened, at least in part. These are the papyrus scrolls of Herculaneum, 1,800 ancient books written on sheets of plant fiber. But the cost was steep. Once the carbon ink met open air after chemical treatment, it often faded to nothing. So yes, you got pages, but sometimes they were blank by the next morning. The journey of these scrolls didn't stop in Naples. In the early 1800s, monarchs treated them like diplomatic gifts. 6 were sent to Napoleon. Others made their way to Britain, given to the future King George IV, and some eventually landed in Oxford and London. In Paris, an early attempt in 1816 to unroll one with a PJO replica ended in disaster, destroying the scroll completely. These setbacks explained why, even after decades of effort, hundreds of rolls still remain sealed to this day. The scrolls had survived, but opening them often destroyed them. So, the question became, how do you read words locked in stone? Unlocking the sealed scrolls. Attempts to unroll these scrolls with knives, chemicals, or delicate machines often ended in disaster, leaving the fragile pages torn or faded, all fighting to make history as the first to reveal the contents of the scroll. The solution to this problem began in Britain inside the Diamond Light Source, a massive synchrotron firing some of the brightest X-rays on Earth. A synchrotron is a circular machine about the size of a football stadium where electrons are pushed to nearly the speed of light. As they whip around the ring, they release beams of energy so intense that scientists can use them like superpowered X-rays to see inside objects without cutting them open. Back in 2019, 2 intact scrolls from the Institute of France were scanned there, producing the huge CT datasets that would later fuel the breakthroughs. Then AI stepped in, trained to pick out faint patterns in that data invisible to the human eye, and turned the scans into the first real chance at reading what lay inside. When you hear, "We scanned a scroll," don't think of a single photo. Think of thousands of thin X-ray slices taken as the scroll slowly turns. Those slices are stacked together by a computer to make a full 3-dimensional block. Imagine a loaf of bread that you can slice as many times as you want in any direction without ever cutting it. That's what the scientists created. A digital loaf of papyrus, every wrinkle and fold preserved. Each dot inside that block is like a tiny 3-dimensional pixel, so small that you could line up hundreds across the width of a single human hair. That level of detail means you can actually trace the paper-thin layers of papyrus curling inside the roll, even though no human eye will ever see them directly. But finding the layers is only step 1. The real magic is virtual unwrapping. Picture the scroll as a cinnamon roll. The first task is to map each thin layer inside the spiral, what scientists call segmentation. Next, they mathematically flatten those layers, almost like peeling a sticker off a bottle and pressing it flat on a window. Only after that can they try to spot the letters themselves. The idea sounds almost impossible, but this same process has already worked once before. Years ago, it was used to read the burned remains of a scroll found in a synagogue at Engedi, where the hidden words of the Book of Leviticus were revealed without ever opening the artifact. The Herculaneum scrolls are trickier, but the concept is the same. For generations, one problem blocked everyone. The scribes who wrote these scrolls used ink made mostly of carbon, basically the same stuff as the papyrus itself after it was cooked by the eruption. Egypt accomplished this by using an AI program that is trained to read the ink on both the surface and hidden layers. To an X-ray, the ink and the page looked almost identical. The scans showed the layers of the scroll beautifully, but the letters stayed invisible. That's why even after the best scanners arrived, no one could read more than hints and shapes. Then came a breakthrough from outside the usual circle of papyrologists. In mid-2023, a researcher named Casey Hanmer was staring at the flattened images when he spotted something odd. In some areas, the surface showed a faint speckled texture. It looked like little cracks or static, and he nicknamed it Crackle. At first glance, it might have seemed like random noise, but Hanmer realized it lined up exactly where ink should be. So, we have these terabyte-sized files of data, basically like a CT scan, like a medical scan of these scrolls. That tiny clue changed everything. Once people knew what to look for, they trained computer systems to recognize the crackle pattern automatically. This is where artificial intelligence stepped in. Machine learning models were fed millions of examples until they could tell the difference between plain papyrus and papyrus with writing. What looks to a human like a messy blur suddenly became clear strokes of letters when seen through AI's eyes. But science doesn't move forward on a single observation. To turn a clever idea into a reliable way of reading, the effort had to become bigger than one lab. In early 2023, a project called the Vesuvius Challenge opened the data to the world. Anyone could download the scans and try their hand at cracking them. And to make sure people stayed motivated, the organizers put serious money on the line. The rules were strict. It wasn't enough to find a few random squiggles that looked like letters. The challenge set a hard bar. To win, you had to produce multiple passages of at least 140 characters each, basically full sentences, and at least 85% of those characters had to be judged correct by experts. To keep everyone honest, the submissions were graded by papyrologists, scholars trained in ancient handwriting, and the code had to be open so that others could rerun the same steps. The papyrologist and Italian physicist Moella became fierce competitors. Behind the scenes, teams of computer scientists built AI systems that combined different approaches so no single model could trick itself into seeing patterns that weren't there. Some used advanced neural networks designed to handle images over time. Others broke the scans into small patches so the AI couldn't hallucinate whole words. By blending the outputs and demanding agreement, the teams built a safety net against mistakes. The challenge spread fast. By 2024, new scans were being taken not only at Diamond, but also at the European Synchrotron radiation facility in France, which has its own powerful beam lines. These newer machines could scan an entire scroll in a matter of hours, producing sharper images and feeding even more data to the global community of volunteers. More scans meant more training material for AI, which meant faster progress, and the results started to stack up. Behind the glamour of letters appearing from a blackened log, there was also a mountain of engineering. Each scan produced gigantic files, sometimes hundreds of gigabytes for a single scroll. Processing that kind of data took specialized software and heavy computing power. The community filled in the gaps by creating open-source libraries and tutorials, so anyone with enough storage and patience could contribute. Without those tools, the scans would have remained impressive pictures instead of readable books. And then in the fall of 2023, all of this work, those diamond scans, the Crackle discovery, the AI models, and the open challenge finally paid off. The Vuvius challenge is now inviting contributions from the global community to interpret the text. For the first time, real letters appeared from inside a sealed Herculaneum scroll. And then came one word: simple, powerful, unforgettable. It proved the scrolls were no longer silent, the day the scroll finally spoke. It happened in the fall of 2023, when a 21-year-old computer science student named Luke Ferreter sat down at his laptop and made history. He wasn't in a lab coat standing next to a massive machine. He was a contestant in the Vuvius challenge running AI models on the public scan data. What came onto his screen was the first real word anyone had ever seen from inside a sealed Herculaneum scroll. It appeared in Greek, but when translated into English, it meant just one thing: purple ferritators. AI pipeline pulled out the faint patterns of ink, and there in the curls of papyrus was a single unmistakable word. He posted the code, showed the screenshots, and the judges confirmed it. The criteria were met. The $40,000 prize set aside for the first letter was his, but the money wasn't the headline. The headline was that a sealed Herculaneum roll blackened and locked since the eruption of Vuvius had spoken its first word. And then came proof that it wasn't just a lucky break. Within weeks, another competitor, N, a PhD student in Berlin, ran his own models on the same scroll. He got the same result, the same letters, the same position, only with even sharper clarity. He earned a $10,000 second prize. But what mattered more than the payout was what his replication proved. This wasn't a glitch. Two different people using different systems had pulled the same word out of the same sealed scroll. That was the moment everyone knew this was real. For generations, scholars said this couldn't be done. The best they could hope for was to unroll scrolls physically and salvage a few fragments before the brittle papyrus shattered. But now, there was a word. One word standing there as undeniable proof, and the word itself couldn't have been more fitting. In the Roman world, purple dye wasn't just a fashion choice. It was the ultimate symbol of power. The richest dye, called Tyrian purple, came from tens of thousands of tiny sea snails boiled down to make just a few drops of color. Senators marked their togas with it. Emperors wrapped themselves in it. Purple meant wealth, exclusivity, and authority. For the first word to emerge from a sealed Herculaneum scroll to be purple was poetic. Committee of kind of Greek scholars, but it's the word purple. And I'm glad it's not the word in or the or and that we found for, but the Vuvius challenge wasn't about stopping at one word. From the start, the grand prize was the true target. To win it, a team had to deliver not letters, not a single line, but 4 separate passages. That's the level of expertise of someone who spends a lifetime studying ancient Greek handwriting. No fakes were getting through. And to make sure, the rules also demanded that all text come from a sealed roll, not one of the fragments opened long ago. The deadline was the end of the year. The prize was $700,000. And then on February 5th, 2024, the announcement came. The winners were Yusef Nader, Luke Ferreter, and Julian Schilliger, a robotics student from ETH Zurich. 3 college students took it home, making history by being the first to extract words from a carbonized scroll. Together, their entry didn't just meet the bar, it passed it by a wide margin. Their system produced more than 2,000 Greek letters spread across multiple columns, forming passages that experts could read and confirm. For the first time, a sealed Herculaneum scroll had given not just a word, but real passages of text. How did they go from a single word in October to thousands of characters by February? Not by inventing new hardware. The scans were already there. What changed was confidence and refinement. Once the community knew the ink signal was in the data, teams could tune their models to chase it down more aggressively. Segmentation improved, making it easier to follow curled layers. Flattening was sharpened, reducing distortions. Models were trained harder to tell the difference between ink and noise. Step by step, the readable area grew. A word became a line. A line became a column. And soon, the scroll yielded whole passages, which leads to the next question, the one you're already thinking. What do those passages actually say? And whose voice have we just recovered? The philosopher hidden in the ashes. What's written on these ancient pages is shockingly ordinary in the best way. After all the buildup, after years of mystery, the first real passages don't come out as mystical codes or hidden prophecies. They read like a calm, thoughtful talk about pleasure, how to enjoy life without lying to yourself. That technology to see non-invasively, right inside a human body. Why can't we see everything inside an artifact like a scroll? The author is asking whether having more of something actually makes you happier, or whether a little is enough. He reaches for everyday examples, music and food, things anyone could understand. In one stretch, he weighs how abundance might dull the thrill, while scarcity can make even a simple thing feel intense. Details inside the text make it feel alive. In the first portions transcribed, a name appears. Xenopontus. He was likely a musician, someone famous enough to use as an example. Dropping his name makes sense if you're trying to prove a point about how sound can stir emotion. And near the close of what's been read so far, the author doesn't end politely. He takes a jab at his rivals, accusing them of having nothing to say about pleasure when it really counts. That last line reads like the end of a debate, someone dropping the mic after making their case. Another thing worth stressing, this isn't just a repeat of something we already knew. Scholars say the words so far are never foreseen text. That phrase matters. It means this isn't just a damaged copy of an old manuscript already tucked away in some library. This is brand new material from antiquity, straight from a scroll no human has read since it was sealed shut by a volcano. So, who was behind this writing? That question matters because the voice shapes how we understand the ideas. The scholars closest to the project, Robert Fowler, Federica Nicolardi, and others have said the style points toward Philus, a philosopher tied directly to the very villa where these rolls were found. Philodemus was an Epicurean, a follower of a school that made pleasure its focus, not wild indulgence, but a balanced life shaped by the senses, by art, by music, by food, by careful thought about what pleasure really means. The scroll doesn't name him directly, at least not in what has been read so far. The big breakthrough you just heard about, the one that gave us whole passages on pleasure, came from one specific sealed scroll, the star of the 2023 to 2024 prize cycle. But in 2025, a different sealed scroll gave us something even more direct, the title and the author. Hundreds more scrolls to go. Seals has launched a second phase of the competition. This second scroll was scanned at Diamond Light Source in Oxfordshire in July 2024. By early February 2025, researchers had their first interior images. A few months later in May, they cracked it further and found the jackpot. The words on Vices by Phyllis right inside the roll. Not only that, but the scans showed the Greek letter alpha, likely marking it as book one of a multi-volume work. Scholars already knew that Philodemus wrote a series under that title, covering arrogance, greed, and other failings. So, to find book one inside a sealed scroll isn't just exciting, it's a perfect fit with what history already hinted at. For this discovery, the Vuvius Challenge awarded a dedicated first title prize of $60,000. The credit went to Sean Johnson from the challenge team and independently to Marcel Roth and Misa Noak from the University of Würzburg. Together, they proved something no one had ever done before, naming a book and its author from inside a scroll that has never been opened. The project leaders don't hide their ambitions. After the 2023 breakthrough, they shifted the target from get 4 passages to read almost entire scrolls for 2024. The goal was 90% of 4 different rolls. That's a massive jump, but it shows the confidence they now have in the method. They've promised to keep growing the data sets to fund open source tools and to keep rewarding breakthroughs publicly. So, the whole field moves together. More scans are already in the pipeline. In early 2025, reports confirmed that 18 additional scrolls had been imaged at Diamond with 20 more queued in France. Many of them show ink signals already. The task now is to speed up the digital unwrapping process so experts can spend less time on the technical grind and more time on interpretation. Thanks for watching. Now, check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.